thrown off train cars, trapped in underfunded schools, denied bank loans. This was the price black people were forced to pay in an America that still called itself the land of freedom. In 1896, the United States Supreme Court legalized the doctrine of separate but equal, turning segregation into law. After centuries in chains, African Americans should have been protected as free citizens. Instead, America replaced iron shackles with legal language, then called that humiliation equality. And one of those new chains was the system of Jim Crow laws, a racist legal order designed to separate black people from white people in almost every part of daily life. So when freedom was locked behind the law, when dignity was blocked on buses, inside classrooms, and across everyday life, what did black people create to defeat Jim Crow? This is Hidden Black Chronicles, and together, we bring buried stories back into the light. Today we expose 10 tools Black America built to survive, fight back, and slowly break Jim Crow from inside the very cage it created. Number 1. Montgomery Carpool Network. Before the Montgomery bus boycott broke out, black people made up around 75% of the city's bus riders. Their fares were keeping those buses alive, paying for those routes, keeping the whole system running day after day. But when they stepped onto those buses, what waited for them was not the respect given to a paying passenger. It was the cold look of the driver, the back rows, and the order to stand up whenever a white passenger wanted that seat. Under Jim Crow, black people faced discrimination, even on public transportation. Same ride, same fare, but never the same dignity. They were pushed to the back, forced to give up their seats, and reminded that even after paying, their place could still be taken from them. Rosa Parks had tasted that humiliation long before she became a symbol. In 1943, she boarded a bus in Montgomery and paid her fare at the front. But instead of being allowed to walk straight in like any other passenger, driver James F. Blake ordered her to get off and re-enter through the back door. The entrance forced on black riders under segregation. But as soon as she stepped off, the bus pulled away. The fare had been taken. Rosa Parks was left standing on the side of the road. The injustice was not just one rude driver having a bad day. It was a whole system trained to treat black humiliation like normal life. A woman could pay for her ride and still be pushed off that same bus, as if her money mattered more than her humanity. Rosa Parks was not left behind because she was poor, because she had done something wrong, or because she did not have a ticket. She was left behind because under Jim Crow, a black passenger could be forgotten on the roadside, without anyone in power feeling ashamed. What kind of society has to be built before people can treat one another like that and call it order? But some humiliations, when repeated long enough, refused to stay silent. On December 1st, 1955, when Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger, the black community in Montgomery saw themselves in her story. The fares they had paid, the insults they had swallowed, the silence they had carried, just to get to work, get home, and feed their children. Almost immediately, Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Council turned that anger into action, printing and distributing tens of thousands of leaflets calling for a bus boycott across Montgomery. By December 5th, the day of Rosa Parks' trial, around 40,000 black residents refused to board the buses. The same buses that had lived off black fares began moving through the city with empty seats. But Montgomery still believed they would come back. When black taxi companies tried to carry passengers for 10 cents, the same price as a bus fare, the city quickly forced taxis to charge a minimum of 45 cents. That move exposed the real fear of the system at the time. They were afraid black people would find a way to keep living without bowing back down. And from there, the Montgomery Improvement Association was born. Martin Luther King Jr. became its president. Churches became places to collect gas money, take phone calls, and organize routes. The boycott lasted 381 days until Browder versus Gale helped make bus segregation in Montgomery unconstitutional. But before that victory ever entered the court records, Black Montgomery had already written it in the streets, through empty bus seats, old cars, tired feet, and a pride that refused to sit in the back any longer. What makes the Montgomery Carpool Network so powerful is not only that Black people boycotted the buses, it is how they turned daily humiliation into collective strength. Jim Crow believed that by controlling the seats, the routes, and the fare box, it could force Black Montgomery to come back with their heads down. But that community drove one another, gave gas money to one another, opened church doors for one another, and kept the movement alive for 381 days. For Black America, this is the memory of ancestors who were pushed to the back of the bus, but still came together and stood up for one another. If this story makes you proud of the strength of Black America, leave a comment below. Number 2. The Green Book. In 1936, in the heart of Harlem, a Black postal worker named Victor Hugo Green published a small travel guide for African Americans on the road. It was called the Negro Motorist Green Book. On the surface, it was a thin booklet listing hotels, restaurants, gas stations, garages, and safer places where Black travelers could stop. But the moment you ask why a book like that had to exist, Jim Crow America reveals a cold and bitter truth. Because for Black people back then, a long trip was never as simple as getting in the car, opening a map, and driving forward. A family might pack food in the car because they did not know which restaurant would serve them. A father might have to plan every gas stop in advance, because running low on fuel in the wrong town could delay the entire trip. A mother might look at her exhausted child in the back seat and still not know whether the bright lights up ahead meant her family could use a restroom or buy a hot meal. That was the fear Jim Crow created. It turned ordinary human needs into a luxury Black people could not take for granted. That is why the Green Book was not just a regular travel guide. It was a survival map written from the lived experience of an entire community. Every address, every restaurant, every stop listed inside carried the weight of humiliation, injustice, and disrespect Black people had endured throughout the Jim Crow era. From one small guide first published in 1936, the Green Book lasted nearly 30 years, went through many editions, and slowly expanded from New York across the country. That detail alone should make anyone pause. If America was truly the land of freedom, why did Black people need their own book just to know where they could stop without being turned away? But right there, in the deepest pain, the pride of African Americans also shines through. When the law would not protect them, Black America protected one another with information. When so many doors were closed, they wrote down the ones that stayed open. An address in the Green Book was not just the name of a hotel or a gas station. It was a message from those who came before to those coming after. In these places, you can be treated like a citizen with dignity, freedom, and basic human rights. The bitter irony is that a country that loved to preach freedom forced its own people to carry a book just to find pieces of that freedom for themselves. Have you ever heard another story like this? Or did anyone in your family ever live through the kind of fear the Green Book recorded? Share it below so these memories do not get buried again. Number 3. Black Press. In 1892, in Memphis, 3 Black men named Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Will Stewart were lynched after their grocery store began competing with a white-owned business in the area. If that story had been left only in the hands of white newspapers during the Jim Crow era, it could have easily been twisted into the same old blame, or turned into a death told through the voice of people who never wanted to see the victims as fully human. But to Ida B. Wells, this was not just an incident to be written down quickly and forgotten. These were 3 names, 3 families, 3 lives taken away, and behind them stood an entire community that understood one thing clearly. If they did not tell the truth themselves, someone else would tell it for them, through distortion. From 1882 to 1968, the NAACP recorded 4,743 lynchings in the United States, including 3,446 black victims. Hearing a number like that, it is easy to feel like you are looking at a statistic already buried in a history book. But behind each recorded line was a town that once stood by, a court that let everything pass, and a family that waited for justice and never saw it come. And the pain did not stop there. After their lives had already been taken, many victims were robbed again of the right to have their stories told truthfully. With just a few biased lines in the newspaper, a father, a son, a husband could be reduced to a blurred name inside a story written by the very system that allowed the violence. So if the black press did not preserve their names, who would? Ida B. Wells picked up her pen in the very place where truth was being choked. She investigated, compared accounts, wrote against lynching, and paid the price through threats, through the destruction of her newspaper office in Memphis, and through being forced to leave the city itself. But her words did what the local courts would not do. They preserved the evidence, preserved the names, and preserved the question America wanted to avoid. Then, in 1905, Robert S. Abbott founded the Chicago Defender, one of the most influential black newspapers in America. On its pages were stories of Jim Crow violence, but also information about jobs, housing, schools, and opportunities in the North. During the Great Migration, when millions of black people left the South in search of another kind of life, newspapers like the Chicago Defender helped people believe they could leave, begin again, and live somewhere they did not have to spend every day learning how to bow their heads. Then came The Crisis, the NAACP magazine, with W.E.B. Du Bois as its first editor, along with the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American, and many other black newspapers. They appeared in churches, barbershops, train stations, and around family kitchen tables. One person would read a paper, then pass it to the next. A single newspaper could move through many hands, carrying news, grief, opportunity, and the dignity of a community that refused to be misrepresented any longer. Before social media, before one photograph could make all of America stop for a few minutes, the black press was already doing that work with ink, paper, and courage. An article could be folded into a coat pocket, passed from hand to hand in church, and travel from one person to another like a reminder that their pain was not isolated, and their truth could not be left for someone else to rewrite. When the mainstream press blurred the victims, black newspapers wrote down their names. And when Jim Crow tried to make silence part of the oppression, every black newspaper page quietly did what society had chosen to avoid. It pulled the truth back into the light, so every black family could understand that some memories would not be swallowed by America so easily. Number 4. The Black Church. On the night of December 5th, 1955, more than 5,000 black people came to Holt Street Baptist Church in Montgomery after Rosa Parks was arrested. Inside, the church was packed so tightly that many could not even get through the doors. Outside, people stood in the yard and along the sidewalks, trying to catch every word coming through the loudspeakers. That scene said a great deal about Jim Crow America, a community forced to sit at the back of the bus, pushed out of better schools, and blocked from the ballot box had still found one place where they could stand together and hear their own pain spoken out loud. In many southern towns, the black church was one of the few places where people could walk in without first reading the face of a white person before they spoke. A mother who had worked for someone else all week could sit down on a wooden pew and hear her dignity named in a language the outside world rarely gave her. A father underpaid, stopped on the road and watched by police like he was a threat, could stand in the same room with people who already understood the weight he was carrying. Those who defended Jim Crow knew exactly what was growing inside black churches. It was not only prayer, it was a community learning how to organize, how to protect one another, and how to keep moving together. That is why, On Sunday morning, September 15, 1963, they bombed 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, killing 4 black girls in the very place where they should have been safest. Even a place filled with Bible verses, Sunday dresses, and gospel songs could not escape the brutality of a system that could not stand to see black people live with the belief that they deserved freedom. But after the threats, after the hateful phone calls, after the nights when people had to look over their shoulders before walking into a meeting, the lights in the black church still stayed on. From Montgomery to Birmingham, from pastors like Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy to the women quietly cooking meals behind the scenes, the civil rights movement grew inside those very rooms. The pride of African Americans lives in those churches. In the middle of a country that kept trying to crush them down, they still came together, kept living and kept protecting one another. Number 5. Freedom schools and black education. In the summer of 1964, during Freedom Summer in Mississippi, more than 40 freedom schools were opened for around 2,500 black students. That number hurts because it came exactly 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, when the Supreme Court had already declared segregated schools unconstitutional. 10 years had passed, yet many black children were still walking into underfunded classrooms, using worn-out books and learning in rooms where lack had become a familiar part of childhood. They heard America speak about democracy, but outside the classroom, they still saw their parents forced to bow under laws built to keep them down. They learned about freedom as a beautiful word on a page, then went home to a state still finding ways to discriminate against their families. The cruelty of Jim Crow education was in how early it entered a child's mind. It could begin with a lesson that left out black history, a teacher who never explained how their community had fought back, or a textbook that made America look noble while never telling them why their own schools were so poor and unequal. Inside the freedom schools, the truths Jim Crow classrooms had avoided were finally spoken out loud. Students learned about civil rights, about voting, about black history that did not begin with inferiority, but with struggle, intelligence, and dignity. The pride of African Americans lives in those classrooms. In the heavy Mississippi summer heat, surrounded by threats and poverty, they still taught their children and grandchildren their history and how strong their ancestors had always been. Number 6. Black-owned banks. What would you think if a family had just come out of slavery, worked day after day to save their first few dollars, and then that money was taken from them by the very system that had promised to help them build a new life? In 1874, the Freedmen's Savings Bank collapsed. More than 60,000 depositors, most of them newly freed black people, lost nearly $3 million in savings. For many black families, that money had been gathered from backbreaking days of labor, from the little savings a mother carefully put away in the hope that her child might learn to read. They had come out of slavery with almost nothing in their hands. And when they tried to lay the first foundation for a new life, that money slipped away from them in a disaster that the poor had to carry the hardest. By the time Jim Crow took hold, the economic strangling of black people did not always need gunfire or signs on the wall. It happened right at the bank counter, through an application pushed aside, or a refusal that never had to explain itself. Picture a father walking in with work-worn hands, his papers neatly folded, a few dollars saved, and the hope of buying the first home his children could call their own. But before his ability to repay was even judged fairly, his skin color was already standing there like a locked door. They did not have to say out loud that he was not worthy. All they had to do was deny the loan and the dream of property. A business, a home, and a future for his children was squeezed shut right there. They're at the counter. That is why, when Maggie Lena Walker founded Luke Benny Savings Bank in Richmond in 1903, that bank carried the deeper cry of African Americans after generations of being pushed out of ownership. It spoke for the dollars lost in the collapse of the Freedmen's Savings Bank. for the loan applications rejected before they were ever read fairly, for families who worked their whole lives and were still blocked from the chance to buy a home. This time, Black people could build a place where their money stayed inside their own community, where today's labor did not keep flowing into the hands of systems that had already profited from their struggle. Number 7. Black towns. By the early 20th century, Oklahoma alone had more than 50 towns founded by Black people. On paper, that sounds like something to be proud of, and it is. But it also leaves a harder question hanging in the air. How far does a people have to be pushed out before building an entire town becomes the only way to live with any peace? Under Jim Crow, Black families could be denied housing, shut out of bank loans, pushed away from white neighborhoods, forced to send their children to underfunded schools, and still be told to know their place. So towns like Boley in Oklahoma, Mound Bayou in Mississippi, Eatonville in Florida, and Nicodemus in Kansas rose from cleared land, wooden homes, church bells, and the hands of families who were tired of asking permission just to live a decent life. In those towns, a Black child did not have to grow up believing power always had someone else's face. For families used to being pushed to the edge, those streets gave them something Jim Crow kept trying to take away: a place to belong. Jim Crow wanted Black people to live only where they were allowed. But Black towns put a stake in the ground and said, through daily life itself, that their children would not spend forever waiting for somebody else to make room for them. Number 8. Economic boycotts. In February 1960 in Nashville, Black students walked into downtown stores, sat down at the lunch counters, and waited to be served like any other customer. What made it so bitter was that those same stores took Black people's money every single day. Black customers could buy clothes, household goods, gifts for their children, and help fill those stores' cash registers. But when those same customers wanted to sit down and eat a meal inside the same building, they were refused because of the color of their skin. Their money was welcome, but their dignity was stopped right at the lunch counter. When Black students were arrested, dragged away from the counters, and mocked in the streets, the Black community in Nashville began to stop shopping at those segregated stores. Right during the Easter shopping season, many families no longer went downtown to buy dresses, shoes, or household items the way they used to. Stores that had grown used to taking Black dollars began to feel their sales drop. The Black customer's wallet, something they had treated as acceptable while disrespecting the person behind it, suddenly became real pressure. That is what made economic boycotts so powerful. Black people in Nashville were making it plain through action. If these stores wanted their money, they had to see them as customers with dignity. They could not keep profiting from the Black community while forcing that same community to stand outside the lunch counter like they were beneath everyone else. Number 9. Federal Post Office. During the Jim Crow era, some letters may have looked ordinary, but they carried a way out. A note about work up north, a message from relatives who had already left the South, Black newspapers sent to churches, barber shops, and poor neighborhoods, or a safe address passed from one person to another. When Black people were shut out of better schools, better banks, the ballot box, and so many paths upward, the federal post office became one of the few places where they could enter the machinery of government, earn a steadier wage, move through different communities, and hold in their hands the one thing Jim Crow always tried to control: information. A Black postal worker was not just carrying letters from one house to the next. He knew which families had recently come up from the South, which homes were receiving Black newspapers, who was waiting on word about a job, and who was sending money or letters to relatives who had gone ahead. In a time when not every home had a telephone, and social media did not exist, one newspaper arriving in the right place, one letter reaching the right hands, one piece of news making it through, could change the direction of an entire family. Jim Crow wanted black people scattered, underpaid, and cut off from one another's news. But the letters still moved, the newspapers still arrived, the addresses were still written down. Along those quiet postal routes, Black America found a steady way to stay connected, pass opportunity forward, and keep their community from being locked inside silence. Number 10. Mail order catalogs. By the late 19th century, as catalogs from Sears, Roebuck, and Montgomery Ward began reaching rural America, many black families in the South still had to buy everyday goods from local stores where disrespect could meet them the moment they walked through the door. A pair of shoes for a child, a new shirt, a plow, a few things for the kitchen. What should have been ordinary family needs could come with unfair prices, insulting treatment, or the quiet pressure of having to humble yourself before a white store owner who controlled the goods, the credit book, and the power to make life harder. That is why a catalog sitting on a kitchen table could mean more than it seemed. A mother could turn the pages, compare prices, and choose what her family needed without taking her child to a counter where that child might have to watch her being talked down to. A father could send an order through the mail, wait for the package to arrive, and avoid one more bargain where the terms were never fair from the start. In the Jim Crow era, a small piece of freedom could sometimes come in a quiet form. A few pages with clear prices, an order form, a package delivered to the front door. It could not erase the segregation surrounding them, but it gave a family a little more choice, a little more peace, and one less moment of bowing their head in stores that wanted black money but refused to treat black people like customers with dignity. If these stories moved you, subscribe to Hidden Black Chronicles and help keep black memory, truth, and courage alive today.